to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya master Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And Louis D'Souza can't be with us. He's got something else that's kind of gotten in the way, but he'll be back. But Anne-Marie, hey, we got David Strickel back here in the house today. Isn't that exciting?
It's very exciting. Good to see you. It's really good.
Just catching up and finding out what's going on in the world of Taya and the world of David Strickel, which it in and of itself is a whole novel right there. But I mean, both things combined together is really cool.
Well, I hope it's not a tragedy.
We've both been through kind of novelish type stuff in the last year or so. So, you know,
That's
it's not
true.
all that far off base, really,
That's
to say
true.
that. But how are you doing, our friend?
Good. Anne-Marie was asking me about the house, and there's not a whole lot going on with the house, but Michael and I are making it our mission to make peace with where we are and be happy that we're living in this beautiful rental property, and that the house will come back together when it does, and we'll be back over there when we get back, and it's just all part of the journey. So
that's a great attitude. There's a Taya attitude right there. I mean, that's just,
yeah.
I think we're done talking about Taya. You just did it.
That's it. We created the experience for our own expansion, period.
That's it.
As always.
Yep.
Yeah.
And of course, we have lots of experience bringing in that expansion. We all do as human beings. Some of us are a little bit more aware of it than others. But there are some people who are aware of it, and they don't even call it expansion. They just know, oh my God, there's this craziness going on in my life. But it all comes down to how we decide we're going to respond to it, which is what you just did. You responded in a way that's like, okay, yeah, well, one more step. That's all it is. No big deal. It sounds simple.
It is. I have to say, I'm back on social media since the first of the year, and getting back into TikTok. TikTok seems to be where it's at these days.
Yeah, everybody's talking TikTok.
Yeah, everything seems to be happening on TikTok. Facebook is a lot quieter for me. Instagram is very quiet for me. But TikTok gets a lot of attention, and I've noticed that in my feed, and of course their algorithm's really efficient, so your feed just becomes whatever you listen to, and you get more of that, right?
Right.
I've got a lot of Abraham in my feed.
Oh, really?
And I quit listening to Abraham years ago, not because I don't love Abraham, but because I wanted to ensure that what I was sharing with the stream was the stream and not something I was picking up, from Abraham and just kind of repeating or regurgitating Abraham stuff.
Right.
And, at the end of the day, universal law is universal law. And
yeah, that's the tricky part.
And, I've got her version of source is different than my version. It's not. It's all the same message, but certainly delivered differently.
Mm-hmm.
And focused differently.
Yes.
And I've gone deep into the appreciation of all things path, meaning really deep into the nastiest parts of our lives were our pre-birth intention, because that's the stuff that really gives us a platform to expand, becoming a more sophisticated version of ourselves. But I have to say, the Abraham stuff feels really good to listen to.
It does, yeah.
It's like this warm hug from the universe, and she delivers it so well. And I really have been forgotten. It just had been so long, and now it just pops up, and I'll stop and listen. Sometimes I don't, but usually I'll stop and listen. And I'm like, wow, this just sounds so nice. and it's okay that it's okay that she's serving that audience that wants that warm hug.
Absolutely.
And she does it. And I've always called her the Beyonce of channeling. She does it so well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, it's interesting hearing that again, though. So, and I know that a lot of your listeners, I'm sure, are into Abraham Hicks.
Oh, sure.
And understand what I'm talking about. And I always want to be sure that I'm not criticizing Abraham in any way. I just want to not copy what they're doing. That's all.
Yeah.
Well,
that's totally reasonable.
That's different. And that was my intention when I started the podcast, in 2017, was to offer something different.
Mm-hmm.
Because I asked that question when I got my channeling to the point where there could be sort of a back and forth conversation, which took years for me to do. I asked the question, why would I want to channel? Why do we need another channel? Abraham is fantastic. And the clarity that came through immediately was Abraham is Abraham. There'll never be another Abraham. There's not going to be a next. That's a unique thing for serving a unique audience. And for some people, that's the thing for a lifetime. And for others, that's part of the puzzle that they're piecing together. And you are going to offer another part of the puzzle. And I was, okay, I don't know what that looks like, but okay, cool. And then the whole Taya thing just kind of emerged from that.
Which is really cool. I mean, basically, you channeled an entire way of life.
Yeah, well, and really, that's why I've gotten more into let's talk more about Taya and less about the stream, because I can channel anytime for anyone and get the answers to questions. But in Taya, they have delivered a system that we can live on if you choose to do so. And they've made it very clear that it's not dogma. It doesn't have to be this system, that everyone operates on some sort of a belief system. This just gives you a foundation to operate in harmony with universal law.
Right. And Anne-Marie, of course, like me, you've been through the boot camp. You've been through the Taya experience. You're a Taya master. But when you were first experiencing what David and what the stream teach, I'm kind of curious. What was your first, not your first reaction, but your first roadblock? Like, what was the first thing you said? Oh, wait a minute, hold on.
I think for me, it's going back to the whole Abraham thing. Is Abraham was very fast, and I couldn't follow that. It was very fast, and I couldn't really comprehend what he was saying. It was with the stream, it was more my brain. It was more very slow, and I could relate to it, and the message was a lot clearer for me. Okay. Now that I understand it all, I can watch Abraham and I can enjoy it. But for me, the stream gave me the information that I needed. I couldn't tell you what that was particularly. I just knew I could relate to it. And then when all the mindset stuff, it just made sense, and it just intrigued me and it grabbed me, and I just wanted to know more. So I did.
Okay. So, well, I mean, that's a fabulous story. I love that. I guess what I was getting at is, did you find when you were first encountering the stream teaching, David's teaching, that you had points there that you had to wrestle with?
Yeah. When I first started Taya, it was just like, I hadn't really had an awful life, and I was like, oh, what have I got? What are my blocks and stuff? But then, and then, of course, there are these things in your life. So it was just the methodical way of thinking, and the way you could work things out, and the way you could take ownership, and all of that I could relate to. And then the way to work things out going forward, and getting this massive toolkit of tricks and things to work out in using your life scenarios that just make things a lot easier. So for me, it was just literally everything.
Okay.
The whole thing just grabbed me.
It just fell into place for you, really.
It really did.
Okay. Well, that's cool. That's great. I mean, I know in my case, when I was first experiencing through the boot camp, what gets taught there, and actually even before that, because David had been on the show for about a 6-month period, I think it was, before that. And during that time period, the thing that I kept wrestling with the most was this idea of forgiving transgressors, to use the Taya terminology, letting go of the transgressors and saying, you know what, they're okay. I not only are they okay, but I'm going to appreciate them. Whoa, wait a minute. What are you
that's a tough one for a lot of people.
I heard that and I said, okay, yeah. Did I miss part of the course? Did I skip?
Well, the real foundation is radical appreciation. We call it radical because it's a radical concept for us at this point in humanity. Radical appreciation of all things. That is source, though.
But even that was easier than for me. I could appreciate all things better than I could appreciate transgressors, which I know doesn't sound.
Yeah, but transgressors are included in all things.
See,
all things blankets everything, all creation.
But that's annoying.
Of course. But notice what happens in your life when you start finding authentic appreciation, not bypassing and not pretending, but digging in and finding authentic appreciation for your life's transgressors really transforms you.
Oh, it does. But there's a line that's from the Apple TV show Ted Lasso that I really love. It's uttered by the woman who plays the doctor, the psychiatrist or psychotherapist, whatever she is. She says, the truth is going to set you free, but first it's going to piss you off. And that truth really pissed me off.
Yeah. Well, when people come through boot camp and they struggle, I will tell them, if you're not struggling in here, you're not going deep enough. You're not doing it right, so to speak. You're not going deep enough if you're not challenged by it. Because
you told me that many times.
Yeah, when you dig in and get really challenged, that's when the growth happens. That's when you're really getting it and learning it. If you just kind of sail through as a good student, usually those people don't graduate. They have to go back and do some things over before they're ready to graduate.
Yeah, it's true. And that's, well, I guess ultimately that's also the challenge with life in general. Are you willing to engage in it, or are you going to kind of try to run an end around and avoid the sticky parts?
Somebody just commented that they missed the channeling. So if I do slip into channeling, and I just recorded a new guided, I'm calling it a guided experience. It's not really a meditation, but it is a journey to source perspective experience. And it's on our Patreon page right now. And after it's been there for a while, we'll offer it on the website that you can purchase it and download it. But the whole point of the experience is for you to create this mental space that you can access source, which you can anyway. You don't need the meditation to do it, but this helps you do it. This gives you a tool. I love to give tools, right? So this is a tool to access that source perspective from any place on your spiral. And it really is that, oh, wait a minute, if I appreciate all things, how do I really feel about this? Whatever it is you're viewing or experiencing. And you'll find that when you make that a practice, you can get there instantaneously. You can shift in a moment. I can see something that starts to trigger me and wait, I don't want to go down my spiral. You can go down your spiral, but if I choose not to, what's the source perspective of this? How do I appreciate this, whatever it is that I'm experiencing?
And to be honest, sometimes we make the choice to go down the spiral without even realizing we're making the choice to go down the spiral. I mean, the training kind of helps you become more conscious and more aware, so that you catch yourself, like you just described. But
I'm
that doesn't mean that you don't
aware of that at this point, because I've been practicing forever. But
and
as far as the channeling goes, in that meditation or that guided experience, I just start channeling. It just happens. So I still do it. I just don't do the induction and all that stuff. But if people say they really love the experience, I have no problem offering that up anytime. It's just, I just haven't been doing it that way lately.
I think it's cool though that this new meditation that you're offering to the Patreon subscribers first is all about teaching people how to essentially do that themselves, to make that connection themselves. Because really, that's the ultimate experience, right? Learning how to communicate with your inner being and to get the kind of clarity that you've been able to share with people through the channeling.
Yeah, because all of that information that I share when I channel, we all have access to it, but we're operating in such a human created consciousness that it's heavily drowned out. So we're detuning the stuff that drowns it out individually, one person at a time, until we convert the entire universe. I'm kidding. I'm not here to convert anybody into anything. It's your path. It's your journey.
Welcome to the cult.
That's right.
But for me though, it wasn't a case of my transgressors. Forgiving my transgressors was easy.
Really?
Easier, because I loved them and I knew they had the faults and I knew they had the history. It was forgiving myself and stop beating myself up.
Okay.
That was what I struggled with.
Wow.
I think
so it's like I was my own transgressor.
Right. We create transgressors for our expansion of consciousness in different ways, but that's the one thing we all do. We all have transgressors, all of us, whether it's ourselves or a person or an illness or an event or something like that. There are unwanted aspects of our existence. It does not matter who you are, you have that. But that's part of the human journey. That's why we're here, really.
Exactly.
It just occurs to me, we're kind of assuming, the three of us here, that everybody tuning in knows about Taya, but that's not always true. With a podcast, you get new listeners and some listeners go away and so forth. So there are probably listeners who don't know much about Taya. Why don't we just do like a 2-minute thing on what Taya is about? I mean, it's Trust Your Abundance, and it's a program that you developed through the stream, but tell people and give people like a lay of the land, just so they know what we're talking about here.
Well, my intention when I came out publicly as a channel in 2017, my intention was to create a system, because I had created a system for myself to operate my life in harmony with universal law. It's interesting what Anne Marie said earlier about the Abraham teachings. I always loved the experience of Abraham, but sometimes the teachings frustrated me. And then I had my own version of that. And really what Esther Hicks did for me was make channeling cool and palatable and not weird. And I got rid of all my judgment because of her sharing of Abraham. I thought, this is really cool. This is the coolest thing ever. I'd already been told I was a channel years prior to this. And so she made that really cool. So I had this intention that for me, some of these teachings aren't going deep enough. And it's sort of more about raising your vibration and loving everything, which is true. That's a good thing. That's going to make your life better. But what about the crap that bogs us down? I had a lot of that going on for myself, and I had to create a system to solve that for myself. That's when I decided to start channeling, because I thought I had something different to offer. And my intention was to teach it to people in a way that they could get it and make it their way of life. Then Taya happened naturally after that. Somebody crossed my path that taught me how to do a course. I thought, well, I'm not going to do a course. I'm going to do workshops. What are you talking about? Because I was thinking Abraham, right?
Right.
And then she was like, well, who's going to come to your workshop? Nobody knows who you are. I thought, well, you've got a point. She's spent 30 years building an audience, and I don't necessarily have the patience for that. So I did a podcast, I did an online course, and the course started out being abundance breakthroughs. Quickly, I can't even tell you how it happened. Very quickly, it morphed into something different. The name Taya came about. It was a chapter in my first book. And then the course turned into the 4 pillars. And it was like it was waiting to be created. And I just had to step into the readiness to share it. And then since then, it's just taken on its own life and its own thing. The thing that we've done that's unique, though, is we've created 4 pillars. And I'm making it very, very clear that Taya will only be the 4 pillars.
And tell people what the 4 pillars are, because again, we know, but they don't know. So.
Appreciation, which is, you mentioned forgiveness all the way to full-blown appreciation. Polarity, which is the study of the energetic flow that causes our vibe to go up and down no matter what. We're not curing or solving polarity. We're going to learn how to deal with it differently, respond to it differently, because that is our choice. Source, we're all beings of source. We all have source in us. Source is love and appreciation of all things. And then intention. We did come here to live life. We came here to experience the earth. And what is our intention? What do we want to experience while we're here in this lifetime? Mm-hmm. That's all Taya will ever be. It's never going to be, this is how you have to live your life and you need to worship the stream, or you need to follow this set of rules. It's never going to be any of those things other than the 4 pillars.
Thank goodness, because I'm not going to Taya church. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. We can have fun at Taya church, but I'm not looking to, you don't need to sing songs to the stream.
Right.
It's so funny, because when I was really getting into channeling, and people would talk about worship, and every once in a while people get into things like that and they want to treat it like a deity, or people treat Abraham like that.
Yeah.
And one thing they said, and I love this, we are the source of all creation. Why would we need anything or anyone to worship us?
Right.
Yeah. And I thought, well, hell, that makes sense. Yeah.
That's my answer to all of religion.
Yeah. Could you imagine being the creator of all that is, and then creating something to worship you?
Yeah.
That's some crazy human insecurity ego thing. That's not some, source of all creation thing, of course. Yeah. So it makes perfect sense to me.
The way I used to phrase it is, if God is all powerful, why does he need worshipers?
Or obedience.
Or obedience. Well,
or allow the negative stuff. When we're thinking of a God like that, people inevitably are going to say, well, you have starvation, you have war, you have people creating just horrible atrocities. How can there be a God? And the source answer for that is, we understand that you are here from your eternal perspective, having this temporary experience, and the suffering expands your consciousness and creates expansion for the entire universe. But the suffering is actually more about your opinion of it than what's happening. And humanity has created an opinion of these events that is very negative and creates our suffering. But who are they to hold us away from the experience that we came here to have? So if you think about it, the Bible, it's very easy to write off the Bible as a human created book that doesn't have any eternal wisdom in it. But I see that it's packed with eternal wisdom. A lot of humanity is in it as well. But when they talk about Jesus suffering on the cross for the sins of humanity. I think that somebody was tapped into the concept that our suffering is our choice, and that our suffering is actually our experiencing the unwanted, if you want to call that suffering. That creates expansion in the having of the experience, and that actually expands the entire universe. And to me, I hope that makes sense. Those two experiences, I think that that's sort of a metaphor for that experience. I think the whole Bible is that.
Yeah, well, you're not the only one who has come to the conclusion that the Bible is one great big metaphor, and that I'm certainly going to be more in that camp than I am in the literal camp, because if I have to look at the Bible literally, I mean, I just have to basically go throw up.
Well, I mean, I think it was written by hundreds of people over thousands of years, and changed and massaged in different ways to suit agendas and all that stuff. So who knows what the original writings were? But I would imagine there was probably some people who were channeling very early on that started writing that stuff, and then somebody kind of put it all together and said, "Oh, this is the word of God, and by the way, it fits our commerce objective to put these rules in there." I think that's what happened. I think that's where it came from. So I think I have heard somebody say recently that you cannot go deep into Bible study and not come out the other side knowing that it's not real, that it's not what it's sold as being.
Interesting.
Well, I can partly see what they're saying. I know the first time I went through the Bible, I was 14 years old. I had just become a communicant member of my family's church. It was a Presbyterian church. And I said, well, okay, if I'm now a full member of the church, I really should understand the driver's manual. So, I read it cover to cover, including all the stuff that we had never read before in any of the services or anything. And I was, quite honestly, I was appalled by what I saw and what I read. So I would bring it up to the church leaders and church followers, and they would dismiss it. I said, "What do you mean? We can't dismiss it. This is part of this book you've been shoving in my face for the first 14 years of my life. What are you talking about?" And they wouldn't hear that. So for me, it was more along the lines of, are people crazy? That was the way I was thinking about it. Because if you just look at literally the stories that are in there and the messages that they pass along, a lot of them are head scratchers, and you can get really, really messed up when you look at it that way. So the only way that I think to make any sense out of it that becomes helpful is to look at it metaphorically. And now, when you're looking at it as a metaphor, now it becomes possible to talk about what you're talking about. But you got to get past that first part. And let's be perfectly honest, there's a broad swath of humanity that won't get past that first part, that literal part. So there's multiple issues going on, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's so much packed in there, and it's been so changed over time. That I'm not really into studying it anymore. I did that as a child too. I questioned also. And of course, the worst thing you can do in most religions is question.
Yeah, God help you, right?
That was my biggest issue right there. I'm like, okay, if this is so pure and so real, we're not even allowed to ponder, or talk about it or question it. We're just supposed to obey. But at the end of the day, it's a belief system.
Right.
And I believe that it's a belief system that people are choosing not to question, because it's sort of this ready-made. And in a lot of cases, it's a social club. I know in my hometown, if you're not a Baptist or Methodist, what are you doing? That's what there is to do there.
Yeah.
And people ask you right away when you're new in town, where do you go to church?
Mm-hmm.
And they invite you to church and do all that stuff. That's how it's really set up.
Right.
So I think it's maybe useful if you're raising children, if you want to give them a set of rules that you don't follow, but you want your kids to. But it's it's a foundation of a belief system that's ready made. Here you go. As long as you fit this belief system, you're golden. And I look at my brother and see someone that lives his life like that, and he chooses to, and there's nothing wrong with that. But he's very much in that, that mainstream sort of Christian mindset, because it's a belief system, and he just chose not to question it.
And that it really is the key phrase there, belief system. Because literally anything that we talk about when we're talking about spirituality, ultimate questions, all that kind of thing, you're talking about a belief system.
Taya is a belief system. It's a chosen belief system without rules and punishment and worship and all that stuff. But it is, because we're not going to escape a belief system. the stream has said our human physical vehicle is like a computer. We're creating all this technology in our own image, really. So think about your physical vehicle as like hardware, and your belief system is the operating system for your hardware. And we all have one, even devout atheists who say there's nothing and it's all science. Well, science is their belief system, or
That's
politics,
right.
or some combination of those things. Usually is what someone that says that they're an atheist and all this, spiritual stuff is foolish. Well, then they're turning around and giving all their power to who's in the White House, or who the leader of their country is, or what's going on with science and climate change, and they make something else their god. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it takes a spectrum of belief systems to create humanity, but this is a chosen belief system rooted in universal law, stripped of all of those human egocentric laws.
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased in favor of it, so I'm not going to sit here and try to pick it apart.
Well, and somebody, go ahead, Anne-Marie. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, but if you go on and just listen to various people who've never met and probably never listened to each other, they're saying the same thing, exactly the same thing, maybe in different ways, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's like you said earlier,
most of us want to be happy and abundant, right? Or whatever our version of abundance is. We want to experience the things that we want to experience while we're here, and we would like to do it peacefully. And it seems like the more you turn up the volume on fear, the less peaceful it becomes, because the more you're starting to believe that someone else's version of abundance is somehow a threat to yours.
And as you pointed out earlier, we're all we're all channelers. We may not realize that we're channelers,
sure,
but we're channeling anyway. That which, by the way, is kind of akin to a feeling I had for the longest time when I was studying Abraham, which was I finally realized from their teaching that there was a steering wheel in front of me and that I was responsible for turning it. It was the first time I was aware that there was a steering wheel there. And after I became aware that there was a steering wheel, I also became aware of just how many of us were not aware that there was a steering wheel. So we've had the car has been under our control all this time. We've had the responsibility because we're sitting in the driver's seat and we don't know. Most of us are just like floating down the highway, hoping that the car stays straight and that the gods of the engine keep us going right.
Isn't it funny though that is branded as spirituality?
Yeah, right.
And there's a whole other side of spirituality where it's like, I need you to read my cards. I need you to tell me what's next in my life. I need my guides to tell me what to do next. Again, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with any of these belief systems. But they're so opposite, yet they're both branded as the same thing. And I don't really care at the end of the day, but it's funny when I just launched a second podcast. We have the Taya Practice podcast now.
Yeah.
We have the Stream of David. I'm going to plug myself here. The Stream of David podcast and the Taya Practice podcast, 2 separate podcasts each week. And in setting that one up, it had been a long time since I set up a podcast. I forgot that you have to pick your categories. Which, like LOA today, what is your category on Apple Podcasts? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I mean,
because
I know
there's nothing that it fits into. Because it's not really spirituality.
But spirituality is one of the ones I picked. I think there's 3 of them that you get to
spirituality because it's like, okay, these are the people that love the out there ideas.
Yeah.
And that's my crowd for sure. So I'll pick that. But I'm not the same thing as the astrologer that's saying this is what's going to happen in your life. I'm saying, no, what's going to happen in your life is what you create. Now, where I do like astrology is this whole vibrational flow that we talk about all the time. I think astrology is really the study of that. I'm just saying, hey, you react. You're going to have vibrational flow. You're not curing that. That's really what astrology is. But don't let someone else tell you what your life's going to be, because how you react to your up and down flow is completely up to you. You have the steering wheel, like you said.
Unless you like going without the steering wheel.
Yeah.
Unless you like the idea of
if you love astrology, that's the place for you. The last thing I would want to see happen is a whole world of zombies just being Thaists.
Yeah.
I would probably be broadcasting from my yacht right now if that were the case. But, in reality, I don't believe in that. I think it takes Christians and Buddhists and people that are into, and I love people that are anything magical. I think that's a journey. Anytime you're sort of stepping out of the mainstream and exploring things that are more magical, because I think the universe is so much more magical and that humanity, we've created this matrix where we want to shut all that down. Oh, no, 3D reality. You've got to, trust science. You've got to and I'm not anti-science, but I do think that people are not thinking about the fact that scientists are dreamers, but they want confirmation. That's what makes them a scientist, but they believe there's something that can be proven, or they wouldn't waste time trying to prove things.
Okay.
Or at least to find evidence for things. That's something that my cousin by marriage once pointed out to me, and that is science doesn't actually prove anything. Science is an evidence gathering enterprise.
Yeah, until that evidence is overcome by other evidence, and suddenly it's a theory again, right?
Yeah, right. Sure. But I guess the other part that is fascinating to me, and you were just touching on it, is this idea that we are all, in our different ways, what we're generically calling spiritual, but we're really people who are trying to decide to what degree do we want to take control of our own lives? To what degree do we want to take control of that steering wheel? To what degree do we want to?
There's nothing wrong with letting go and trusting God, if that's what you believe in, or trusting the astrologer if that's what you're into, or going to the tarot card reader. I've done all that stuff. I've experienced all of those things. I have looked for answers outside myself. I've looked for guidance. I have, communed with what I thought were guides, and then later come to realize it was my own ego.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's whatever works for you. One thing that I know that works for me is, and I'm kind of curious to see what your take is going to be, because I can kind of imagine, but I'm still curious. What works for me is I'm always looking for, how do I explain this? I'm always looking for whenever I'm looking at a connection with another human being of any kind, I'm looking for, what do I call it? The reality. Reality takes me into the world of 3D, so I'm not sure what to call it at this point. I'm looking for the genuine connection of source through that, with that person, because we're all interconnected. And so I'm looking for, okay, as I'm interacting with this other person, whoever this person is, under whatever context it is, am I experiencing what I think of as like the source connection?
I would always say that you pay attention to how you feel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Which is exactly
if your vibe is high and you're in that it's that heady space of loving all that is, and your physical vehicle responds positively to it, and you're in that moment not negatively judging anything. You're sort of seeing, I don't want to say seeing through rose-colored glasses, but how they, everything that you see suddenly is positive, and nothing bothers you. That's source when you're experiencing that. Because when I channel, I'm totally in that gear of they love everything. Every aspect of humanity, the things that we fear and judge, they love all of it because they're seeing it from a much different perspective. This human experience is a temporary experience. It's not all that is, and it's not all that we are. And it's something that we can choose to go down a path that is very unwanted. But that chosen path of unwanted is expanding us no matter what. Because we're having the experience. The having of the experience, no matter what it looks like, is a tool of expansion.
Yeah. I guess what I'm driving at is, you just described beautifully what the great beauty is of that source connection that we all have. I'm kind of taking it a step further and realizing that since we all have that source connection, it's as if there was like a bridge through source that each of us can go to reach the next person. And that as you reach the next person, you get a David flavor, or you get an Anne Marie flavor, or you get a Louis flavor, or whatever it might be. You get a flavor of that person as they connect to you through source. That to me is the experience that I look for when I'm connecting with people. And if I'm not able to make that connection the way that manifests for me, if you will, is like what you said, it just doesn't feel right.
Usually the connection is going to dissolve pretty quickly if you stay, up there in your high vibrational space, and for some reason you're crossing paths with someone who isn't there. Then there's going to be a disconnect, but it doesn't have to be friction. At least it won't be on your part. But
well, sometimes you're up there, and they're perfectly honest. It's not like I'm high vibe all the time. I have.
Well, nobody is. We're not here to be high vibe all the time. Taya doesn't make you high vibe all the time.
That's right.
Taya is very much about how you experience the low vibe period differently.
So sometimes I'm going to be the one shutting it off, is what I'm saying. Some of the times I'm the one disconnecting.
Yeah, like if I came in all pumped up and high vibe and prepared, and you were in a crappy mood, you would have two choices. I would either annoy the hell out of you and you'd have to find a way to deal with that, or you would raise your vibe. You know, as the host of the show, I'm sure you know how to raise your vibe to kind of meet them. But if somebody comes on and they're challenging you, you've probably had guests come on and challenge.
Oh, occasionally, once or twice.
Yeah, I'm sure that happens. I mean, I know that's probably not your brand to constantly be butting heads with people, but there are a lot of people that think this is all silly or hokey or BS or, you know, that sort of thing. Yep. And if they're choosing to come on, and I go back to Abraham, I saw an Abraham once where the person got called up into the hot seat just to sort of dispute.
Right.
And I think Abraham / Esther handled it so well because there was no arguing. There was no, because she was channeling. This was source. It was a seeking to understand their perspective and let them be heard without fear.
Right.
Where in church, what do? You're not allowed to do that. No. You know, not all churches necessarily, but we're kind of going back to that.
But there is, with almost any religious institution, there's going to be some level of resistance. That's what we're really.
Usually. Yeah, because they've tied it to commerce, and that means you got to have these believers following, not questioning. I love questioning.
Well, not just commerce; they've tied it to ego. They've tied it. Okay, my identity as church leader or as mosque leader or whatever is tied into this, and you're attacking my identity.
Well, you made yourself godlike, and that people are just supposed to believe what you say without question. Right. And I'm not going to bother arguing any of my stuff with anybody. I'm just going to say, in our belief system, every belief system has value. The whole spectrum has value. That whole spectrum is what creates the friction or the tension that we need to expand. The only way we're ever going to have utopia is if we all dial into the same exact vibration with zero fluctuation, and we're all just agreeing about everything all the time.
Which would pretty much end the whole experiment.
Right.
Yeah.
What would be the point?
Yeah. Now there you have the actual end of the world.
Yeah, I was reading. I stumbled on something. I think I talked about this the last time I was in here. I just finished watching a TV show that I really love called Succession, and people consider it, you know, one of the best TV shows ever, and just well acted, well written. And I really loved it, but I didn't like any of the characters. There was not one likable character on the whole series. But it wasn't about liking them. You know, at the end, I won't spoil it, but it was all about who was going to take over the empire at the end. They were billionaires. It was a billionaire family, and who was going to. They were 4 children. Who was going to lead the empire when the dad died? And people got so invested in who they wanted to be, and then somebody piped in and said, "How can you watch this garbage? They're so unlikable. And." I don't bother commenting on stuff online because I don't want to get into that with people. But I just remember thinking, well, that's the whole point of the show. It's not about them being good people or caring about who wins. It's about watching them all sort of self-destruct in their greed and doing it in a brilliant way. But what's the alternative to that? Are you looking for entertainment that doesn't have friction? Because it doesn't exist.
That's true.
Any story has got tension in it. That's because the story is a reflection of our human journey. Just like a computer or everything that we create is just a reflection of ourselves. So any novel, any TV show, any movie, any script is going to have that sort of, beginning, middle, and end experience. And the middle is usually going to have drama. And I joked, about and I'm not trying to, this is a hot button word these days, but the whole woke thing, people are always, I think that word's been twisted in all sorts of directions, but I was just joking that I guess a woke story would be a person met a person, they agreed about everything, the end. Because if everything's offensive, then what if you're seeking to never offend anybody or create, tension in a story. And if nothing can, if you want to allow anything to ever take you down your spiral, something's going to anyway. Your judgment of it is probably taking you down your spiral, right?
Sure.
So there you go. It's inevitable that you're going to go down into that lower vibrational space, but that really is where the growth occurs.
I know that for some people, and certainly for me, the value of entertainment isn't in whether or not it has conflict or polarity or drama going on it. For me, the value is their resolution at any point in the storyline. And for many people, that doesn't matter. There are a lot of people that's just
don't watch Succession, you'll hate it.
Yeah, I kind of gathered that from the way you described it. It's not on my top.
I was going to say, don't go looking for that. I understand that, and it's nice. It is nice when it kind of comes together at the end, but if it's if it's so well done and it's so entertaining in the process, the conclusion doesn't mean a lot to me.
And that's true for a lot of people. For a lot of people, whether or not there's resolution really is not the point at all. So
remember The Sopranos when it just went black and nobody knew what the real ending was, and it was sort of like, hey, use your imagination, let it be what you want it to be. I thought that was cool. Anne Marie's like, I didn't watch too much television in the United States.
Yeah, I don't know these programs. I just go back to Ted Lasso. That's what I watched and loved because it was just nice and happy.
It was, yeah. It had its own drama, although it was kind of a quirky kind, but that was all right. But for me, actually, if I really want to be entertained by drama, I don't bother with entertainment. I just look at the world.
Turn on the news.
Put the news on.
Look at what's going on anywhere. I mean, there's plenty of drama going on. There's no lack of it.
I find that the news though is so predictable because it's how everybody's going to react and
not so much the news, not so much. Well, the news, you can go to the news, but I just look at anything in life where there's people, which is everything. That's part of the reason why I do this podcast, because I get to meet so many different kinds of interesting people with interesting backgrounds and storylines and so forth. But to me, those are, if you're going to be entertained by drama, that to me is the best place to look. I mean, you don't have to worry about a story coming out of it. It's right there. It's just it's part of.
I went to visit my family in Austin, Texas. Michael and I went 2 weeks ago and visited, and we came away with all kinds of interesting observations and stories and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't really need The Sopranos.
Nobody got killed,
which is kind of surprising, actually. Considering
no one died.
Yeah,
my family gathering, but it was interesting and entertaining nonetheless.
I've just got the kids, and just watching them is literally like watching your own TV drama show. It really is.
It's a great example. Yeah, precisely. Because you're watching
them navigating their way through life and their way through relationships, and it's just intriguing.
Yeah. I think sometimes we get caught in the idea that drama has to be huge. Drama doesn't have to be huge.
No.
Yeah. The little subtle things are more interesting sometimes.
I think so. Yeah.
More expensive. But people don't know, if you're new to this and this whole expansion thing. I'm talking about expansion of consciousness, meaning you have moved through an experience that was unwanted. And now your being knows what that experience in physical is because you manifested it. That can be positive or negative. We are the ones that label everything positive and negative.
Right.
Source says it's all positive because it's all expansive. So you go on a vacation or you have an experience that you love. Of course, that expands you also. But if you think about when we really get creative, we are at our most creative in the unwanted experiences.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I have said many times, you're never more creative than when you're flat broke.
That's true.
If you've ever found yourself, and I honestly, I feel bad for people that were born into money and trust funds and things that have never known. Like I have a half sister whose mother had money and and so she had a very different childhood. I talked about this a lot. Right. Very different childhood than I had. And she's 47 years old today. She has never known one day in her life, never wondered where her rent was coming from or her next meal. She's never had to think that, not a day in her life.
Yeah.
And can't relate to that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at the times where I was, my bank account was negative and I'd gone through all the money in my house and I'm thinking, gosh, how am I going to feed myself and the dog? How am I going to do that? I had to get really, really creative. You have to get creative. And I look back at those experiences now in such deep appreciation that I created it.
Mm-hmm.
I manifested the experience of being broke, making a lot of money, being broke again, and that up and down experience. I love that. I love that. And if I never experience being broke again, I'm okay. I know what it's like.
Been there, done that, got the t-shirt.
I've checked off that box. It's okay. But there are other things, that I know I have not experienced yet that I can't relate to. And then once I have that experience, I always look back in appreciation that, wow, I know what that means now. I'm a more sophisticated version of me because I had the unwanted experience. That's why I don't suffer in things the way that I used to. That's why when the house burned down, I didn't sit there, oh, why me? This is terrible. It literally was like, okay, this is what we're doing now. Yeah. So just learning to meet those experiences in instant appreciation because you understand, A, I created it, and B, this is an expansive journey for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a very different way to live life.
It is. It's a very powerful way to live life. It's also a very responsible way to live life in the sense that you really can't get away from your own responsibility with this practice, this philosophy. What do you call this? Anyway, you said it's not spirituality. What do you call it? We know what it is. What is it?
I call it a mindset practice.
Mindset practice. Okay.
It's a belief system. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you could call it, I mean, we talk about source. That's pretty damn spiritual, right? To talk about source.
Yep.
So that's my version of spirituality, is that source is a consciousness of all creation.
Mm-hmm.
But I really leave it at that. If you want to interpret that as God or angelic beings or ascended masters or all these names that we give to things, I think that's fine. But if that being is judgmental or pulling the strings and you're just a puppet, well, that's not going to work in this belief system.
Well, it works. You just don't go very far with it.
Right. It's not going to serve you. The belief system will not serve you well if you're there. If you can move yourself out of that belief, and you can, if you want to, then this is going to work great.
Yeah.
And it is claiming ownership of all your creation from the beginning, from your point of entry. And people really struggle with the childhood piece. But you have to understand that the child is projecting in as an eternal being of source, with a very different perspective of what the human journey is going to be. And they learn the human perspective from all of us as they develop. They acquire
it's a question I'm sorry. I was just going to say, it's a question that I've asked a lot of guests on the program, particularly those who've gone through some really traumatic experiences in their lives. Do they believe that they came into this life predestined with a plan to go through all that? And the answers are predictably varied. Many of them will say, why would I even come to a life to experience what I've gone through? Because I've gone through hell, and they certainly have gone through hell. So I can get their perspective on that. And that kind of reinforces for me just how challenging this mindset practice really is. It's not for everybody.
No, it's not. But I have had people, it's talk about a spectrum, people that come through boot camp. I have everything from someone who, like Anne-Marie, life has not been horrible, but they have created enough in their own lives that they are seeking to level themselves up. And it's sort of that, what is the hierarchy of self-actualization, the self-actualization's at the top, that you have to be pretty advanced just in your social structure in your 3D life to have the luxury of exploring that. And that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have that. And then we have everything. Then the other end of the spectrum is I have people who have had immense suffering, immense. And as children, being heavily abused physically, mentally, sexually, and everything else, people whose children have died and been murdered, committed suicide, all of these things that we consider sort of the worst of the worst experiences. I have worked with all of that, or a lot of that at this point. And even if I haven't experienced, I have witnessed somebody come into acceptance that, not that, I created it because I wanted to suffer. That's just too simplistic. I'm an eternal strand of consciousness projecting into a set of circumstances that I know are going to expand me in some way. And if I'm seeking exponential expansion, I'm going to pick the teenage mother with no financial resources, or the person, or the illness, or the extreme poverty, or the war-torn, country. I'm going to pick that from that perspective, because I'm an eternal being. I'm coming to have this little tiny grain of sand experience as a human, and the suffering experience is going to expand me or give me an opportunity to have those types of experiences. And in my eternal state of consciousness, all of that was just a human opinion. And it's so hard for us to wrap our minds around that. You mean suffering's a human opinion? Yeah.
Yeah. but it is hard to wrap our minds about.
Well, and it takes work
very
to get there, and that's the thing. It takes some time and some work and some desire to get yourself there. But when you talk about enlightenment or awakening or whatever you want to call it, to me, that's what that is understanding that, hey, I may not be there all the time, but I can access this space that is appreciation of all that isn't judging something as, oh, that should have never happened to me. That was terrible. I had the worst parents ever. I was abused. I've been through hell, as you say, and continue to create that judgment. And then they continue to live that judgment and manifest other things that are sort of branches of that throughout their lifetime until they finally realize that, hey, maybe I need to quit judging that. Or they don't.
We're touching also on something that's always been a bit fascinating to me, because I especially love the way you just expressed it. I mean, we're beings who project into this, we're source beings. We project into this, grain of sand reality, I think is the way you expressed it. And we know in advance what the circumstances are going to be, and we jump into it perhaps because we want to do this massive expansion. So we're willing to go into a war zone, or we're willing to be born into extreme poverty or whatever it might be. And the thing that's confusing to me and interesting to me at the same time is, well, the being that wants to do the learning is, in every way that I know about, a human being. It is a being that is an egoic being. And what we're talking about here is a pre-egoic being choosing based upon being an egoic being. Am I making sense here? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, it's sort of like, the whole red pill, blue pill thing. I don't remember which is which.
Yeah.
I know two colors. So you're this eternal consciousness, and the experience is, I'm going to project into being a human being. I'm going to forget all this eternal stuff so that I can have a human experience. That human experience is going to include things that I like and things that I don't like. And I want to move the needle a little more in my expansion of consciousness. So I'm going to choose something a little worse. So I don't think that somebody comes in and says I'm the abuse experience or being aborted or whatever is something that I'm choosing specifically. It's I'm choosing a vibration that is going to cause more unwanted experiences somehow. So I'm going to project into this ego.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm born, I'm not going to have all those judgments, but I'm going to start experiencing 3D life even before I'm born. And I'm going to start responding from a human perspective. And I'm going to start learning how to be a human being by having these experiences. But we all know that we ultimately choose from the beginning how we respond.
Right.
And two different infants can respond very differently to the same set of circumstances.
Yes.
And what is that? Why is that? And so they are choosing to have different. We talk about two siblings all the time that grow up in the same household with the same circumstances and end up being very different people.
Right.
Because we have all of this discernment of preference, and that is our ego. But I think humanity has sort of overdeveloped the ego. I think religion has really served to overdevelop the ego, because it separates us from what source truly is. Mm-hmm. It rebrands source as something else, and then we're operating more in ego, and that really drowns out source. But that journey has created a lot of expansion for humanity. Look where we are now.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
And now we're at the point where, hey, we don't need all that stuff anymore. That was sort of like the training wheels. Let's kick off the training wheels. Let's break the matrix, and let's move out of it. And we see that happening with the younger generation.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. They don't want any part of the matrix. They want to be out of it. Yeah, but then they tend to get right back into it one way or the other, it seems. Yeah. That's all.
But that's what generations do. Generations are rebellious for that very reason. They are trying to rebel against the matrix.
Yeah, and look how the rebellion has evolved. I mean, gosh, when I was younger, just smoking a cigarette, in the woods behind the house and, lying to my parents, that was plenty of rebellion. Now, you're not even a gender anymore. How dare you decide that I'm a gender? I'm going to tell you what I am, and it's going to change. It's going to evolve. It's going to shift around. To a lot of people, that just sounds insane. But to this younger generation, that vibration is coming on strong. There's it's not all of them, certainly, but it's many more than used to be.
I love all that you said. I want to clarify something that I was trying to bring out, because I don't think I really totally brought it out. I was talking about how in our pre-egoic state, in other words, before we become an ego in this human lifetime, in that pre-egoic place, according to this understanding, we are still behaving egoically. Do you understand what I mean? In other words, we're not ego yet, but we're making decisions as if we were. And that's the part.
I think where we're getting stuck, I think, and this is something maybe I'll come on a channel and we'll really get into it.
Okay.
The choice, right? Here's the eternal strand of consciousness seeking to have a deeper experience. Well, that's ego.
It is, and that's what's so weird about it. Yeah,
I totally understand that. I do think the only quote unquote need of source is expansion. But what the stream says is the expansion is guaranteed. So really it isn't needed, but from our perspective, it seems like it's needed. It's guaranteed. But there's still a spectrum. We talk about strands of consciousness being expressed independently. I think the strand of consciousness is a form of ego.
Sure.
That extension of consciousness that is projecting into physical already has some of that ego energy in it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's probably what's making the determination. Hey, I want to suffer more so I can expand more. And I know that I'm an eternal being. I know that any suffering I experience is really nothing, in terms of eternal, because there's no linear time. So there's no linear experience. It's just experience.
I
think that consciousness of source isn't discerning the preference, but I think the strand of consciousness is.
Which raises the very interesting question: what makes a strand of consciousness become a strand?
Well, write your questions down for the stream. I would rather channel that answer. I think I know what it is, but I would rather channel that answer.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll have to have you back then, because we're out of hour here, So.
Yeah, that's true.
We'll have to have you back to channel that one, because that to me is, I doubt that most listeners are even thinking about that one, but I like that one.
Probably like, dude, I just want to know how to manifest more money. What is this crap? I'm going to go turn on Abraham. That feels so much better.
Hey, what could I say? I love the more esoteric stuff. I always have. That's just part of it.
Oh, I do too. I like to go deep and weird, and definitely do, because that's to me. But I also love to pull it back into 3D. Let's have fun with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be so mystical and spooky. It really doesn't. We make it that way.
Yeah. And after all, when you really come down to, this is one of the things I loved about Richard Bach. I don't know if you've read any of Richard Bach's work, but he wrote a number of books, including one of my favorites, Willie D'Souza's favorite too, called Illusions. And he basically broke down human existence to two things: learning and having fun. And that's not a
spiral, right? Yeah,
that's really not a bad description, because that's pretty much what it is.
Spiral is your fun, and down the spiral is your learning.
Yeah.
And then when you learn, you go back up the spiral.
Yeah.
Oh, I figured that out. Oh, I solved that problem. Oh, I moved, and that experience is over now. Any appreciation that you have for the negative experience sends you back up into high vibration, which is fun.
Right. Yeah. So have more fun and learn while you're doing it. Welcome to Planet Earth. Hey, David, as usual, this has been fun. Thank you so much for joining us once again. And we
do have you, Anne-Marie.
Yeah.
Say again, sorry.
I said it was great seeing you. We haven't communicated directly in a while.
No, it's been great. I've loved listening to you two going on. It was brilliant. Going really deep into it, but yeah, it was great to see you, David. Thank you for coming on.
We always have fun.
Thanks for having me, as always. Always fun.
Yeah, because then we just kind of do these deep dives. But let's definitely have you back to bring the stream with you to answer that question about what does make a strand of consciousness decide to become a strand.
I like that. I'm going to forget all about it, because I want to transfer.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we want to keep it pure, no doubt. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Anne-Marie, as usual, because I love your, you do like to listen, I know, but when you come up with what you're going to say, you are always right on pitch. It's perfect. So I appreciate that as well. And thank you to our podcast.
I just like learning.
Well, yeah. She just summarized the whole show right there. That's it. You just did it. So thank you much. Thank you to podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.